everyone, my name is Emily Yeen.
My name is Madeline Miles.
We are graduate students at Jacksonville State University. We are in the Geographic Information Science and Technology Master's Program, and we are also doing an internship with NGMC and CNUC. Today we're going to be talking about cultivating native habitat on rural cooperative right-of-ways using an IVM approach. So the entire basis of the project is on the importance of pollinators and power lines. All of these services that we cannot live without. Pollinators provide so much food and pollinating our crops every year. Without them, we would lose so many different species of fruit and vegetables that we eat. And so it's just as important as the power lines that are providing all of this power to our houses. Both of these things we heavily depend on. The problem over the last few decades, though, is that pollinators are starting to decline in population. The main cause of this being rapid urbanization as well as agricultural processes. What I mean by that is all of these expanding cities, the concrete, the asphalt, it's just not enough resources for these pollinators to survive and sustain themselves. And so all of these expanding cities as well as the agricultural processes like farms, tree farms, anything that's taking away a habitat from the pollinators is a problem. Over the last few decades, 90% of our grassland ranges in the southeast have disappeared because of urbanization and these farming practices. If the pollinators are running out of a habitat, they're running out of resources, what are they to do? The answer is in the right-of-way. The right-of-way is this little slice of nature in an urbanized environment and could be the perfect spot for pollinators to live and have a habitat.
So our project goals here, we want to create those pollinator habitats. As we like to say, if we build it, they will come. If we can create a safe and productive environment for the native species especially, it'll have an overall positive effect on that area, which is good for humans as well. We want to repair defragmented grasslands. It's important to have diverse species in that area as it gets stronger and becomes more resilient and can also support a greater number of native species. We want to increase the safety and reliability of services. We can establish a clear pattern of treating sites once we know just how effective the herbicide method is for treatment of it is or isn't in certain areas. Knowing that power is going to be reliable for the people is very important. We want to reduce vegetation-related outages by finding more environmentally safe and human-safe answers to keep trees away from power lines. Reduce vegetation-related outages by finding more environmentally and human-safe answers, such as herbicide. We can keep trees away from the power lines, as well as solve other problems caused by undesirable vegetation. Lower row management costs. Our research aims to find more productive ways to keep the rows friendly to desirable species, and to keep it clear of the undesirables. We want to practice long-term sustainability. We aren't looking for a short-term answer. We want to find something that will last as long as the infrastructure that we have already built will last.
How the right-of-ways are currently managed right now is with safety and reliability as the top priorities. We want to make sure that there's no trees or any kind of vegetation interfering with the power lines and causing an outage. Trees cause 22% of non-major day event outages and nearly half of all major event day outages across the United States distribution grid. How do they combat all of these power outages by trees? Is they mow and they prune the right-of-way every 3 to 5 years, and they cut down all these trees, make sure that they're not going to grow back, and then 3 to 5 years later, they come back and do it again. The problem with this method is not only are they mowing these undesirable trees that grow into the power lines, but they're also mowing everything else, including the native grasses and wildflowers that are there as well. And so by mowing all of this, you're just further diminishing the different variety of floral resources provided to the pollinators, and overall, it's not going to be good for the ecosystem. Another issue that comes with just mowing the right-of-ways is that a lot of times the area that you're working in can be unsafe for the workers. In our specific project area, we're in the northwest corner of Georgia, which is a very mountainous region, and a lot of times the right-of-way will be a very steep hillside, and it's not going to be safe for the machinery to get up there, and so the workers will have to do it by hand, and even then it's not going to be safe for them. The less we have them out there, the better for them and the safer for the workers. What is a way that we can do this that's going to be safer for the workers and better for the environment? And that's going to be using IVM. IVM is integrated vegetation management, and so that's just combining multiple different methods into maintaining the right-of-way. That can be from herbicide, mowing, all these different methods combined. And so we're going to be focusing on herbicide for our project. Some of these other studies in Connecticut, New Hampshire, Missouri, Maryland, they're using a combination of methods: herbicide, mowing, trimming, as well as planting seeds. They're planting wildflower and grass seeds in the right-of-ways to further encourage that growth. They're getting good results, but the problem is that they're spending lots of money and lots of resources doing it. And so what we want to do is make sure that we're not wasting all of these resources. We want to know which one is working the best and which ones are not even working at all. Maybe it's not doing anything. So that's what we're trying to figure out with our project, and so that way it'll be more sustainable and have less wasted resources. So for our project, we are only studying the efficacy of the herbicide treatment by itself, because with our hypothesis, we believe that by spraying this herbicide, it's only designed to target the undesirable tree species that grow in the right-of-ways. Any species that's going to interfere with the power lines, it will target, and anything that is wildflowers, grasses, the stuff that we want to be there, it will leave alone. And so what we believe, over time, the undesirable trees will disappear in the right-of-way, and our desirables will have more room and less competition to flourish. As we continue the project, we're going to be able to see how the herbicide is working by itself, and then we'll be able to reevaluate if we need to add any other methods in, but for now we're just testing the herbicide by itself. So we keep referring to these undesirable and these desirable tree species, and so here they are, some of them listed out for you, what we're talking about. Any undesirable tree species is going to be like maybe a pine or an oak. It's going to be growing over 20 plus feet into the power lines, and it's also not going to benefit pollinators because there won't be any flowering nectar. Whereas our desirable tree species like redbud and dogwood, they grow under 20 feet, so they won't interfere with the power lines, and they do produce flowering nectar that helps the pollinators. So more desirable species are going to be all of the wildflowers and grasses that you see. The main three that we found so far is frost aster, goldenrod, and any kind of species of milkweed we've been finding. These are the big three so far that we've been able to spot, and as we continue, we want to see more variety. We know that these are here right now, and they're the only ones supporting our pollinator population, so as we continue, we want to see more variety and more growth of the species.
To collect our data, we've been using an app called Survey123. This is an app that allows us to collect data after we've made a scorecard based on its geographical location. We also ask questions like, is it row organization, the size of the area? We look at what time we're collecting. We use systematic or representative to collect data. And then we ask ourselves questions about, are there pollinators? Is there nectar, flowering plants here? Are there dogwoods? How many undesirables we see? This is basically a form-centric data gathering solution, so we can collect our data via web or mobile devices, even when we don't have connection to the internet. And this allows us to analyze results quickly and upload data securely for further analysis. And what's really nice about Survey123 is once the scorecard has been digitized, when we go out into the field, it's just clicking buttons, so it's pretty simple to use. So these are our pollinators observed, and it's scored on pollinator types and the number of sites we've seen them at. So obviously other insects, which are ones we can't quite identify that aren't like butterflies or bees or wasps, so these are very common in other sites, whereas butterflies are also really common, which is nice to see because those are very common and nice pollinators. Along with bees, good to see that they're pretty common. And we also have like moths and flies and beetles, and occasionally wasps. So one of the questions we have here is, are there 2 or more milkweed stems present? And those are important because migratory butterflies are very attracted to milkweeds. So unfortunately, we see 83.8% are not having milkweeds, but we hope to see that number go up from our 16.2% as we go into the spring and into the summer. Another question we have on our scorecards are undesirable trees present? And unfortunately, they overwhelmingly are. We see that a little under 30 of our spans do have undesirable trees, and it looks like about 5 of them, however, do not. and we want to see those numbers again start to change as we measure the effects of the herbicide over time.
Looking at the different project study sites, they are all identified by this sign. It's a big old yard sign in the project study sites, and it's letting the entire community know as they drive by that this is a native grassland and pollinator conservation area, because we want everyone to know what's going on, and we don't want people to go over and interfere with what we're working on, but this is just a way to get the community more involved and letting them know what's going on.
So when we were measuring our plots for our survey 123, we go and find a standard size 150 feet by 10 feet plot. And so we go out and we find the center, and then we measure up from there. So that way each span can have an equal amount of land surveyed for the scorecard. We do this because it would be incredibly time consuming, if not near impossible, to go out and measure and survey every single span. So this gives us a very good average of what the data would look like. And here we see our project study sites, which is Boynton Drive, Battlefield Parkway, Old Highway 2, and we have a treated and control site as well at Highway 2. And again, as Emily was saying earlier, these sites are up in North Georgia, very far north, almost in the Tennessee area, so we have very foresty, wooded areas on often very steep hills and inclines. So what do we do when we go to the sites? First, we measure our study plots for our survey 123, and we're going to complete those scorecards, and we're going to map our points using a different app, which we're going to talk about in a moment. We're going to fly the drone, and we're also going to record audio, which is important for our soundscapes. And a soundscape is the acoustic environment as perceived by humans in that context, which is important because what it sounds like is going to change every single time we listen to it, and because it can also tell us what is in this environment. We also, many of us also have field journals, which are nice because obviously sometimes, phone batteries are going to die, iPads are going to be forgotten, so having a field journal gives us a moment to really write down and think about what are we seeing as far as like species are. Along with animal sightings, not every animal we see is a pollinator, but many are indicator species, which just tells us that, hey, this area is very healthy. So even though they might not be directly helping to pollinate, they can be a sign that pollinators are in this area and other species are healthy. For example, turkey. We've seen turkey at a few different sites. We also document the weather conditions because sometimes if it's cloudy, that can affect how especially how the drone sees things, or if it's very windy, we might not be able to see as many pollinators out and about, especially if they're like the flying, like the bees. We also have our scorecards and our audio inventory, so we have to really keep track of like what we're recording and what we're seeing and how we're storing our data, because there is a lot of data that we're collecting at every single site and every single span that we're going to.
So while we're out in the project study sites, we need a way to map all of the utility poles and the centroids that we're collecting. And so what we use is an app called ArcGIS Collector. Anybody can download this on their smartphone. This is a picture of me standing next to a utility pole, and I have my phone out, and I'm just placing that pole as a point on the map. And here you have a screenshot of what it's going to look like on my phone. All of those black points are going to be the utility poles, and any red point that you see is the centroid of the span. And so this is designed for the best conditions for working out in the field. It's a light background with dark colored points so I can see it as clearly as possible on my phone. And then once we have all of these mapped, we can then use all of these points and create a story map, or we can create even more maps from that. So now let's take a look at those maps. So for part of this project, we had to create a story map that's basically just outlining what the project is, everything that we're talking to you about today, but that way the community can read it, interact with it, and they'll be able to know what we're doing. So if you follow this link or scan our QR code, you can follow along the story map as well, but we're going to flip over to it and show you an individual study site that we've been working on. So when you open up the story map, it's going to look like this, and you can scroll, and there are all these different tabs up here so you can navigate through the story map. We're going to be specifically looking at the project sites, and more specifically, we're going to be looking at Boynton Drive. All of the project sites are divided up by, they're all different varying levels of traffic. Boynton Drive is definitely the medium level of traffic. I would say Battlefield Parkway is right off of I-75. It's high traffic. Highway 2 is going to be our lowest traffic. Now this is Boynton Drive, what it looks like on the map. This yellow area is the herbicide treated area, and then the yellow dots are the centroids of where in between each span is, and then the white lines are our utility poles themselves. And so Boynton Drive only has these 3 spans, and it's also located here next to Peavine Creek. And then this map was all created with the points that we collected in ArcGIS Collector. Here's a drone video from Boynton Drive. All of the footage and images you're going to be seeing in this presentation are taken between October and December of 2020, and then we hope to collect more in the spring and summer. So here's a video of Boynton Drive. We can see it's separated by this grassy area, and the right-of-way is a little bit farther from the road, and it's also bordered by this forested area. This picture here was taken October 24th, and you can see lots of different white dots all along the edge of the right-of-way. All of those white dots that you're seeing is frost aster. That is the main plant species that we found in the right-of-way that's supporting the pollinators right now. You can also see a lot of brown dead vegetation in there. That's all the species that have been sprayed with the herbicide and they're decomposing. And so hopefully in the spring and summer it'll leave more room for our frost aster to grow further. Here's just an up close of what that looks like. You can see a bee climbing on it, and we just hope to see more variety because right now we're only seeing frost aster, a little bit of goldenrod, some milkweed, but that's it. So we really want to see more variety because the more variety, the more different pollinator species we'll see as well. One thing that we do as part of the project sites is we also record audio to get a better understanding of the soundscape. So if we can understand the soundscape, we'll also be able to hear all the different things that we're not able to see. While we're out in these project sites, another thing that we're doing is recording audio clips, and we're trying to get a better understanding of the soundscape. So here we have different sound recordings from the span, specifically span 39, which is right in the center. And I recommend if you want to hear these sound clips, pull up the story map, use headphones for the best quality, and you're just going to be able to hear the different insects and animals that are out there at the time, as well as noise pollution from the traffic and any human activity. So, for example, you can listen to this one and you'll hear completely different sounds, and if you listen to a recording from the next week or the following week, it's always going to be something different. In this video, you can see how we set up the sound equipment. This was taken with the drone by Miles. And so you can see I'm standing here in the centroid of the span. There's a little yellow flag right by my foot. And I'm setting up the different microphones. I record for 2 minutes on each microphone. So that way in total we have 4 minutes to choose from. And we try and get about a 30 to 45 second clip out of that. After looking at the story map, you can see all of the different processes and some more pictures that maybe we couldn't include in this presentation, but here's some more pictures that we thought were really interesting that we didn't get to include in the story map. We have a crawfish, some nightshade or devil's tomato right in the middle there, some different flowers, and this green fruit in the middle is called maypop. So all these different things that we're finding out there, and it's just important to document all of it and know because these are indicator species letting us know that there's other good stuff out there that we like.
Drone data collection and management. So for this, to process our data, we used an app called Drone to Map, and this is by Esri. So the UAV used, which stands for Unmanned Aerial Vehicle, was a DJI Mavic Mini 1. This is a very small and lightweight drone, which is very handy for being out in the field, especially because sometimes it's hard to find a good place to take off and land. So with this small drone, it was very easy to go around to the different sites. So our flight method included calibrating the drone, which just lets the drone know where it is GPS-wise. And then we'd fly to about 40 meters AGL, which stands for above ground level. It's important to have the same AGL for every site because even if we're at different elevations, because again we're in North Georgia where it's very mountainous and hilly, it's always 40 meters from the ground. Then we'd set the drones to SYN mode, which just means it flies very smoothly and a little bit slower than normal. So that way we know we captured our data in a very clear way. Within angle the drone sensor down to capture oblique at 90 degrees. So that means the camera, the sensor on the drone, is looking directly down, so that we're looking not at weird angles, so we know that we're capturing what's directly below us. We then fly at half speed in SYN mode, so about 4 meters every second, and we take pictures about every 2 seconds or sometimes a little bit faster, just so we can collect as much data as we can in that short time that we're up there. We fly the length of the site taking pictures and then fly back to the landing spot also taking pictures. It's important to have as much overlap as 70%, so that when we're stitching the pictures together, it knows where it is, it knows what order to put the pictures in. And having pictures of the road in the shots is nice because it's easier to orthomosaic based off where they are geographically. So this is the resolution that we're working at. So here 1 to 1,519 just means that 1 inch measured on the map can represent 1,519 inches measured on the ground. So this is just a representative scale, and the resolution here is really good, and we're going to explore that more as we zoom in. So here we can see a bit more of the features present in this area. We can see more of the cars in the parking lot. We can see the top of the building and the different air vents and stuff. We can also see the lines on the road, and we can begin to see some of the different vegetation textures. Again, as we go farther in, we see what looks like a pond. We can begin to see the power lines. We can see a drainage ditch runoff area, and we can start to see the helipad where we land the drone. Here we can really start to see the textures. Those reddish ones are undesirables, and the more green are desirables. Here's just another example at that zoomed in level, where we can see a storm drain, we can see the cracks in the road. In the grass you can see little bits of trash, and you can see a sign that someone's put up. So again, this resolution here is very good. You can even see myself next to the helipad, and that orange thing next to it is the drone box. So our vegetation textures are very important when it comes to the remote sensing processes that we're going to do. So remote sensing is basically just the process of detecting and monitoring the physical characteristics of an area by measuring its reflected and emitted radiation from a distance. In this case, that distance is 40 meters AGO. So here are textures. They look different based on what they are, so this can help us in the future in identifying what type of vegetation there are. And again, our red and brown and dead looking one are going to be our undesirables, whereas our greener, still more alive looking, is our desirables. And the different types of textures we have here range from more leafy, some of them are more stem-like, and we can also see the textures of the power lines, which are obviously different from the vegetation textures. We can even see two types of water textures, which are going to be this image and this image up here, which again are going to look different when we are analyzing them with different remote sensing practices. So here's 5 different battlefield park orthomosaics. So again, we started out in October, and we have data all the way up until, we actually have more current data now, but here we have all the way up to December. So we started out in October, and we were looking at a smaller area, and it was harder to get all the way out there. But as we became more familiar with the site, we became a lot more efficient and effective at collecting our data. As we can see in this November picture, November 13th, the data did not want to orthomosaic very well, and this is just due to there not being enough overlap in the images. So when I'm processing the data in drone to map, this is what it looks like. All these blue dots are where I took pictures. In this picture, there's 172 that have been orthomosaic together to create one picture. On average is about 150, and these are collected in free flights, so they're not programmed. The drone is being flown manually, and the flights are about 10 to 15 minutes per site. But if the weather is, if it's very windy, it can make the flights a little longer or a little shorter if we have to land early. And in drone to map, we can create 3D models of the terrain that we're looking at, which we see here. This is super important because The terrain here is so steep and elevated that if we lost the vegetation here, there would be a lot of erosion, which could be very bad if it rained a lot, which would just wash out the entire area and make it unstable, especially for humans as well as like machinery. And the 3D model here just really gives us, as well as other operators, an idea of what the area actually looks like, so that it's not just a point on the map for them. So the picture up in the top, that long one, the long orthomosaic, that is from December 5th of last year. And then the data it's being compared to in the gift is from October 16th. And those are the 2 dates that we're really going to be looking at across the different ways. So again, this is an orthomosaic created in Drone to Map, which just means it's putting together all the pictures and it knows where it is geographically. This is a DEM, or digital elevation model. This shows us how steep those areas are, or in the case where the road is, how constant and consistent that elevation is across that long area. And it's very detailed, as we can see here, where the road cuts through the site. It is a lot less steep and it's flatter, whereas where the vegetation that we're monitoring is along is a very steep area. So here we have an NDVI, or Normalized Difference Vegetation Index, and again the data in the GIF being compared is from October 16th to December 5th. So an NDVI, here the targets being observed contain live green vegetation, which means it's the healthy vegetation, which in this case is going to be the stuff that's not been sprayed by the herbicide. So we know that chlorophyll content of vegetation absorbs strongly the red light wavelength of sunlight, and then it's going to reflect that near infrared. So this is heightening what we're looking at, so it shows us where the healthy vegetation is, which is changing over time here in this GIF because it's been sprayed by herbicide, but also because the seasonal change. And here we have an SAVI, which is Soil Adjustment Vegetation Index, and this is used to correct that NDVI for the influence of soil brightness in areas where the vegetation cover is low. So this is important because along these areas we do have bald spots, for lack of a better word, where the soil is just, it's there and there's not vegetation there because either the vegetation is not growing there, or there was just simply never vegetation there to begin with. For example, where the road is and where the drain ditches are. And this is helpful because it shows us a more accurate version of where vegetation is. And again, we can see that change in time between the two areas. So where we see our darker green spots are going to be our healthy vegetation. This last one is an NDBI, or Normalized Difference Built-Up Index. And this is useful to map urban build-up areas, which is especially applicable to many of the areas we're looking at here because they are in highly urbanized areas, and we want to look at how the vegetation is doing alongside these urban areas. The ratio here is based to mitigate the effects of terrain illumination differences as well as atmospheric effects. So because some days when we go out it's incredibly cloudy, or some days it might be incredibly bright, this is going to mitigate those effects.
So moving forward with the project, what are our plans for spring and the rest of summer? What we're really wanting to do is start documenting migratory species, including monarch butterflies that are traveling into our area now. Same thing with different types of birds. We went out there not too long ago. We saw a purple martin, which travels from South America. So we're really just wanting to study more migratory pollinators. Another thing we would really love to do is if we were able to go out at nighttime and maybe record the soundscape of the nocturnal pollinators for bats and moths. And just as important as the daytime pollinators, we want to get the whole picture and the whole idea of the right-of-way. So if we're able to go out there at nighttime, I think we would be able to find so much more.
As we head into spring and summer 2021, we have a new site on Smith Gap Road in Lafayette. It's 2 spans surrounded by protected forest, and it's really interesting because it's on such a steep incline that there's not a whole lot of urbanization there. It's very forested. We've already seen things like turkey and a lot of just really neat things over there. And it'll be a good indicator of whether herbicide treatment will be as effective in less urbanized areas.
So what we hope to come out of this project is for more electric companies and utility companies to adapt these methods into their own right-of-way management. across the entire United States, there's 160 to 180 million utility poles. Now, not all of them are going to be suitable into turning into a pollinator habitat, but there's still 100 million that would be amazing for these pollinators as a space for them to find refuge and a home as these urbanized areas are taking away their habitats. So as we grow into this project, we really just want to reclaim more land for the grasslands, for the pollinators, and be able to live together in cohabitat. So what we've been able to find so far in the project is that we know the pollinators are out there, we know the desirable species are out there, we see them, we're recording them, we just want to see more growth. Same with the grasslands, we want more growth from the grasses and the wildflowers and just to see further expansion. And again, for the utility side, we want to improve the safety and reliability of the services as much as possible by reducing those tree-related outages and reducing any kind of right-of-way management costs. So we want to be able to make this as long-term sustainable as possible for the company and for the pollinators. So in conclusion, wrapping up everything, are there any questions for us? Thank you so much for watching.